Oh my, look at my phone. It's like dirty from the pottery class.
Oh my gosh, the mark of an artist.
Welcome to Nerdlandia.
Welcome to Nerdlandia, where we all have our own personal treasure trove of books. I'm your host, Emily Case Buskirk. Firstly, happy Galentine's Day to all who celebrate. It is one of my favorite days of the year. I just adore a low-stakes holiday. For today's Cozy Cute conversation, I did a buddy read with my pen pal Karen, a librarian who lives in North Carolina. We read Love from Scratch by Kaitlyn Hill, a rivals-to-lovers romance set in the backdrop of a test kitchen. The plot centers around Reese, a southern girl who lands an internship at the food media channel Friends of Flavor in Seattle, and Benny, a fellow intern with some serious cooking skills. Things heat up in the kitchen as they get cast as co-stars in a viral new video series, but they're also competing for a job that would allow them to stay with the company longer than just the summer. Even if you haven't read the book, I think Karen provides a lot of insight into the often dismissed romance genre, and in keeping with the Galentine theme, I also had to ask Karen about her stint working as a florist. With that, let's settle in for another Nerdlandian chat. Karen, thank you so much for being here today, and happy Galentine's Day. I am super excited that you get to be the guest for this one, and that we were paired up in a friend matchmaking event 3 years ago.
Yeah, no, that was such a fun little surprise that it worked out that we, got connected and stayed connected. And thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. And so we are able to send emails back and forth in a form of modern day pen pal. What do you think keeps the art of pen pal correspondence alive?
So I think that keeping it alive kind of just depends on your perspective and your desire to stay connected. Because I know some people have the mindset of oh, I don't talk to my friends very often, but then when we see each other, it's like you catch up like old times. And so I'm not really of that mindset. I like to try to keep in touch with people. And I think that wanting to go deeper than social media kind of keeps it alive because you want to know oh, hey, what was the story behind that picture? Or what else have you been doing? Because I know you don't travel all the time, but you only post pictures when you travel, that kind of thing.
Oh, definitely. And also there is so much more to somebody besides their social media presence.
Exactly.
And for us, we live halfway across the country from each other. We've never met in person. And I personally love getting to look forward to letters and just that form of staying in touch. For me, the email is what makes it convenient. We don't go into actual paper correspondence, which is another format some people enjoy doing.
No, I really do like the email aspect of it. I think for each friend, you have to find a different what works for you. One of my friends, we stay in touch via text, but we pretty much only text about books. But when we see each other, then we're so what's been going on? Just finding that way to just think about your friends. I don't know. I like it when people let me know they're thinking of me, whether it's through a little card for my birthday or just an email kind of out of the blue. So I do look forward to our emails too, because, I have never been to Nebraska. And so I feel like I get kind of a picture of what life over there is like. And I'm okay, now I got to go to Nebraska someday, but who knows?
Yes. And then I got to go to North Carolina, and we're so close to getting to actually meet in person. I feel like that's I don't know, you hear nowadays about internet friendships and people actually getting to do the in-person meeting, and it will happen someday. And in the meantime, we have the emails.
I was really bummed when they were yeah, you want to meet up? And I was oh no, I can't ask off work because I don't have any hours.
Oh my gosh, I know. The struggle is real. Real life happens, but we're doing what we can. Another thing that's cool is that since we started exchanging letters, just how much we've grown as people too. And I mean, you earned a master's and you're working full time in your field and you're at a library, which I think is super cool. So what made you want to be a librarian?
It's something that was kind of in the back of my mind forever. I think as a kid, I was always oh, I want to be a teacher. But then in my mind, I was I like books, maybe a library. But the learning that libraries are more about working with the community rather than just focusing on oh, what book do I want to read? I mean, yes, that's a really big part. But nowadays, libraries do a lot of social services. I work in the children's department, so we do a lot of programs outside of just reading. We have, different clubs that are fun. Like I get to do a lot of craft programs. And so when I was applying to grad school, I was really just interested in kind of diving into that community outreach about libraries. Just the fact that libraries are so diverse, seeing just how different people have similar needs, but also differ, and being able to meet their needs.
It's such an important community resource, and I think undervalued, and people don't see all of those things that a library actually brings into its community.
So I drive the bookmobile, and which is really fun because I literally leave the library and go to people's neighborhoods and to see the kids. People always talk about how, kids don't play outside these days, but at these apartment complexes, these kids really do play outside. And we come up and they're so excited to see us. And we actually partner with a mobile farmers market and get the kids tokens so they can buy their own fruits and vegetables. They love it, man. And then they come back and they're like, look at my lemon I bought. And they just take a bite out of it, which I think I've never thought to eat a lemon like that, but it's what they do. And so it's cool to just see people in the community, and maybe they didn't know about the library. And then later on, they are like, oh, hey, I'm at the library. Oh, there's Miss Karen or whatever, just to make those connections. That warms my heart.
That is precious. And I don't think I have ever bitten directly into a lemon, but you have to love the enthusiasm, right?
Yeah.
So to pivot this more over towards our book discussion, do you have any strong thoughts on the traditional book versus audiobook debate?
I think I used to. Honestly, I kind of used to be a little bit of a snob when it came to literature. I think it was the fact that I went to this private school. And so it was this mindset of you got to be literary, you read fun books, but you also got to read the classics. And so I think for a while I didn't even try audiobooks, and I just thought, I don't know if I made a judgment call, but I just didn't get into them. And but now I'm like, a book is a book is a book. Graphic novels count as reading. Parents don't always like to hear that, but they count as reading. They're learning vocabulary. They're making connections. I think I read somewhere that your brain still uses the same parts whether you're reading a physical or digital book versus an audiobook. So you're still connecting with stories and language. And now I'm an audiobook girly. Half of what I read is audiobooks because I commute and I need to multitask when I read because I don't have as much time to sit on my couch with a book.
I really, opened up my perspective with it because I think initially I was like, oh, they're so different, but they're really not. At the end of the day, you're being an audience to a story. And sometimes you can sit down and enjoy a book. And sometimes you're on the go at the gym and commuting and doing all your chores, and it's all great. For me, of course, the narrator of an audiobook is pretty important, and sometimes I have opinions on that, but otherwise, I still consider it reading.
Mm-hmm. I want to recommend an audiobook narrator. So Julia Whalen is great. She's narrated a lot of Taylor Jenkins Reid's books, and she's one, because in the Libby app for libraries, you can search by narrator. So if you find a narrator that you really like, you can look right through and see. Because I basically tried to listen to everything that Julia Whalen's published, unless it's weird. So I don't know. If it's not something that it piques my interest, I guess I should say it that way.
Wow, pro tip. I did not even realize you could search by audiobook narrator. And for those who don't know, everybody probably should know, Libby is just a wonderful resource for being able to check out books for free by using your library card.
Yes, always a plug for the library.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what made you get into the genre of romance novels? Was there a particular read? Has it just always been an interest of yours?
How many I read has definitely grown since I've gotten older, but it all started when I was in middle school with Sarah Dessen. She's a really popular young adult author. She's written books like The Truth About Forever and Just Listen, just about these teens, have their struggles and then they fall in love. And I feel like she writes about teens who kind of have they're thoughtful and they're really thinking about life and how they fit into things and their futures. I just know there was always like something kind of like deeper about them that I really liked. And she's actually from North Carolina. And then in high school, I really got into Nicholas Sparks, which is he's a little cheesy sometimes, but his books were always really emotional. And I think I learned early on that I really like an emotional book, like bring all the tears. And I don't know, I just like to be moved by books. And I think romance is a genre that really does that for me.
And I guess I consider myself mostly genre agnostic. I don't find myself gravitating toward any in particular. I just like good stories, but I also like getting recommendations of things I probably wouldn't have sought out myself and then also enjoying it. So that was what made me excited for our buddy read of doing the book Love from Scratch together, because I would not have been like, yeah, I want to read this romance book. But yeah, it's just like fun getting to experience that together, discuss it together.
No, I really enjoyed that. And honestly, I really like that you let me suggest the book, because I'm going to this romance authors festival in February. I've been trying to read all these authors. So it was nice that we could share together in my pursuit of diversifying my authors.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. What is that event about? I hadn't heard of anything like that before.
So my really good friend told me about it, but basically it's called Love Y'all Fest. And it has maybe 60 plus romance authors coming. Like they have young adult, new adult, which I kind of hate the genre new adult. I don't know. Sorry, that's a sidebar. And then they have adult books and then adult authors. So basically it's just a bunch of romance authors where they're going to have like panels and presentations, and you'll get to get your book signed. I've never really been to a book signing before, so I'm kind of curious to see how that goes. I do have this indie author that I really like, and I actually knew her growing up. She was my youth group leader, and now she lives in Texas, and she writes a lot of rom-coms, which I really enjoy. And I've started ordering personalized books from her because I'm like, oh, well, you want to support. And then it is kind of fun to be like, okay, I do have this note from this author that I'm kind of excited. I'm trying to find some favorite books and buy them. I had only read one of the authors before I bought my ticket, which maybe is a little crazy, but I knew it would be a good time because my friend is really into books, and some of her Instagram book friends are going to be there, and yeah, it should just be a good time.
That's really cool though. And I also just like for this discussion where I don't really know much about romance as a genre, and I would consider you somewhat of an expert.
And I don't know about that.
Well, I don't know what kind of term you want to use, but that's how I consider it. So.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I do think, because romance novels have different like heat levels, how much sexiness is in a book or whatever. And so one of my friends, I would consider her the expert, and she's definitely influenced me in my reading. But she created this like spice level so that you can ask, because she works in the library too. So it's like when people ask for recommendations, you want to make sure that they can handle what's in a book. So I'm definitely like a 3 on the scale, like sometimes more than kissing's okay, but most of the time I prefer to read in that range. But I'm not about like smut shaming anyone, like read whatever you want to read. But I do think with romance, like sometimes people can't see past like the bodice ripper idea, like they're like scandalized, but there's a lot of character development and relationship development in those books too.
Yes, and I really enjoyed the book Love from Scratch because to me, I didn't think it was just about the love story. It also was a lot about the food media world and also the double standard that women face, and especially when they have an online platform. So what were your thoughts on the book as somebody who has read more romance?
This one was a YA as well. This is where the genre gets confusing because it's young adults, really like high school, but they were out of high school, so it might be new adult. But I think I just call everything YA. But this author, she really did a good job of like creating a setting that you want to read about with these characters. They had the goal of working at this food media company. And so they did the internship. And I really liked how they just set up the details of their work and how they were involved with the company and like their role. I liked learning about the Friends of Flavor channel, how they got into doing their own cooking segment. They did the amateur hour segment just because there was a need and they got to move past just being boring old interns. she helped them kind of level up their role with each other or their involvement with each other and kind of gave them, that little kick to push them together. Because, how are they going to fall in love if they're not working together, seeing each other a lot? So Benny was a really great guy. I think that I really liked his character. He, as far as like her sharing about her struggles as a woman, he really made room to understand. And so I think it is representative of guys that sometimes, men get a bad rap. Sometimes they deserve it. And so I think she did a good job of kind of showcasing how different people react differently to women and to their role in companies or their role as a friend, that kind of thing. She just did a good job with like the food puns and stuff. I thought her like use of language was really hilarious. Like the one scene where they're just in a pantry and they're going back and forth, holding up different foods and making silly puns. And I think though my favorite was when she like wrote a note and was like, "Are we a Gouda?" or something. I just love a Gouda pun.
Absolutely. Yes, the food puns were on point. For me, as I was reading, I was like, okay, this probably isn't overly realistic all in all of how a company like Bon Appetit would work or Food Network or something like that. But it was believable enough. And I think it did have some hard-hitting insights into sexism in the food industry and really in any media. So I thought that was overall handled pretty well. And I agree. Like Benny was a character who hadn't maybe seen women experience misogyny or like double standard or anything like that. But he was open to learning about it. And he was just a very wholesome character.
Yeah, no, I loved him. And I don't know, I think I love that they're so young and they're like not just trying to like take advantage of each other. Like they really are trying to like get to know each other. And then, it's kind of like rivals to lovers. Like they don't initially just fall for each other. They're kind of like they're competing for that work role and they just kind of fall into liking each other just through getting to know each other and, noticing how his shirt's always so tight on him and he wears his little ball cap and, those types of things.
I always had to laugh because whenever something like that would happen where she like notices his shirt fitting snugly on his torso, then she's just like, "Good gravy," or like, "This boy is trouble." And I'm like, that is so Southern. It's just like the little comments because the author is from Kentucky and the main character is Southern. For you as a North Carolina, how do you feel the author executed that?
I was skeptical because at first I didn't realize the author was from Kentucky, but she has that inner experience. She did a really good job. So the scene that I really related to was when they were at the restaurant and she wanted sweet tea and they were like, "We can bring you some sugar." And she goes on a rant about how it's not the same. And let me tell you, it is not the same. You brew tea when it's hot, you add the sugar when it's hot, and it like melds the flavors together to make sweet tea. And so I just really related to that. And then also just the fact that, she kind of mentions that like her mom goes to church and church culture is such a big part in the South, especially I think with like our generation having like family and involvement, our parents maybe went to church, brought us to church, that kind of thing. And I thought she did a good job of kind of showing how her mom would like react to certain things that she was going through or whatever. And it just kind of made me chuckle because, her mom would be like, "You're swearing," or "You thought, Lord have mercy," or, that kind of thing.
Yes. And for me, as somebody from a small town, the church culture, that part definitely hit home for me. That is very real. And the judginess, talking about somebody behind their back, rumors, all of that. Yeah.
And she had, this big trauma from her past of something that happened with, a pastor's son. And it's like, that kind of goes back into the issue of sexism of how like they were both in the same situation, but she was the one who got judged, who got bullied and, called names and all this stuff because she's the girl. And, obviously she was asking for it. And so it's like, I hate that it's like she did a good job of showing something that's bad, but she really portrayed it as it happens sometimes and it's not fair. And so I think hopefully she'll bring to light. And then people, maybe there's some kid that read it and maybe they were calling somebody names and they're like, oh, maybe, like kind of, I think bringing up that kind of issue to teens can help them, from books and stuff. You do learn more than your experience, so if your experience doesn't have those types of situations with sexism, you'll probably be faced with it in the future someday, but it kind of gives you those inferences that you can make or whatever.
Or people read that and they felt seen in their experience and even maybe validated, because there is a lot of like internalized shaming that goes on when women and girls get blamed in those kinds of situations, and you do think it's your fault and you beat yourself up. By watching Reese push through the situation and learn and grow from it, then you cheer her on. And yeah, if you've been through it, then I think there is a really validating part of that too.
Yeah, no, that's a good point too. Yeah, not just from the perspective of like being a witness to that, but if you were in that situation, it gives you kind of some reassurance too.
Up to this point, we've tried to keep this mostly spoiler-free, but I do want to take a moment to maybe try to discuss some more spoilery content. So listeners, if you do want to read this book and don't want to get spoiled, then skip ahead a bit. Were there any lowlights of the book for you?
I guess maybe just the life outside of the media studio felt a little bland to me. Like, I mean, maybe this is realistic, but she doesn't really try to like make other friends other than the people at work. And I think she and Benny kind of incidentally become friends, but she doesn't have a lot of people her age to hang out with. And I think that would be something, she's living on the university campus. Like, surely they have other people staying there and they would do like at least from my experience, it felt like I would have tried to do something, but.
That's true. It could have just been attempting to streamline the storyline.
I know, probably.
Yeah, that is kind of weird. I mean, she just moved there and she really cares about this job opportunity. But that is kind of weird, especially if she's going to be staying in that area. She'd probably want to try to get a head start, but at least she has her long distance friends.
I really didn't like reading the scene when they were at the conference or convention and they were doing the meet and greet, and like everyone was just hearing her stress and how, she's being touched by people that she doesn't want to. People just kind of act like she owes them a photo, like they're not being just friendly fans. That, I don't know, just the stress of that. It was like, this is not supposed to be stressful book.
I mean, that wasn't supposed to be stressful, but yeah, for me, that chapter started off like really slow, and it's just like, oh my gosh, like I don't really want to read about a conference. And then it just quickly got really intense and sensory overload and disrespectful dudes. And that was definitely a lot to take in. But again, it was a good illustration of the BS that women have to put up with and expect to just deal with it with a smile.
Mm-hmm. Because I feel like usually with romance, I do gear myself up like, okay, it's not going to be a perfect world. There's going to be something. So I feel like that kind of was like the penultimate part.
For me, this is like a personal thing, but I was like, oh, we're ending this at the Space Needle. Very cool. I guess I just thought that was a little overrated, but I really loved where they had their other dates, the really beautiful Seattle scenery. I thought she did such a great job explaining that. And then ending at the top of the Space Needle was just like, tourist trap.
I was really happy. So I've been reading, a lot of adult romance, and usually the epilogue has them getting either engaged or it's their wedding or it's like their baby or something like really future. But I really liked that theirs was pretty chill. Like it wasn't.
Yeah.
They're like, what, 18? Wasn't.
Right. Yeah. It was like them
happily ever after, but not,
I know. I did appreciate that because I definitely didn't want it to end in some kind of engagement or something like that, because that would be way too fast, too soon. That was cool. Like, I didn't like the location that she chose, but I did like that they were just celebrating their 3-month anniversary like a normal 18-year-old would do.
Yeah, exactly.
That was cute. Were there any highlights or takeaways from the book for you?
I think the main highlight that I have is that she is a really strong woman and she worked really hard to achieve her goals. So she got this internship, using her graphic design skills and is working in marketing, but really she wants to be able to work with the show, using cooking, but she's still learning about that. So she kind of, stretching herself. She wants to stretch herself. And so I thought that was a really interesting aspect, and it gives her more dimension, and you kind of, relate to, like, it's not just she's good at everything that she does. And so I think that really created kind of her dynamic with Benny. Benny comes from his family where they're Italian and they have a restaurant. So he's got a lot of skills just inherent from that. And so, they kind of bicker and banter and tease each other about stuff. And she, struggles. But, he still is willing to, like, teach her stuff, even though they're competing for the same spot.
Yeah, I think that the author's portrayal is very kind and sympathetic toward the main character, but it's also not shying away from showing, parts of her that she still needs to develop, which she's 18. Of course, she still has a lot of growing to do with emotional maturity and with her professional maturity. So I think it was well handled, and I thought she was a delightful character.
Yeah, no, I really did like her. And I loved her and Benny teasing each other about their names all the time. So she calls him, like, Bendy Straw, and he calls her, like, Reese's Cup all the time, which I'm sure Benny doesn't get called Bendy Straw very often. Like, it wouldn't be a common thing that people would do. But I'm sure Reese would probably get annoyed if people always called her Reese's Cup,
That is true. But also, she's the protagonist of a food-themed love novel. Of course, her name is going to be Reese.
I know, right? I really liked the scene where they ended up stuck in the pantry together and they almost kissed. And it was like oh my gosh, way to, leave us hanging. But also they weren't ready for their first kiss yet.
Yes, that was a great scene. I liked that their relationship was built on a mutual respect. And I think that kind of started out because they were work rivals where they recognize the skills that the other person brings to the table. But then it genuinely became this very supportive relationship.
I actually started reading. She has a book coming out in April, and I used my librarian perks to get an advanced copy. And it's set in the Appalachian Mountains. So it's another Southern-based book. And it's about, like, a hiking reality TV show. So she's using media. There's a connection between the two books. So it's Reese's one of her best friends, and Ultimedia is the company that's putting on the Wild Adventures show.
Well, I also like that we're kind of continuing on the food theme with fake dates and mooncakes, which I've been listening to and enjoying.
You're going to have to keep reminding me about it. But no, I'm excited to read it whenever, because I don't think I found it at the library, so I couldn't put it on hold. Maybe.
Okay, yeah. And that one is by Shirley, and it's very fun, but don't listen to it when you're hungry because there's a ton of delicious food. Another seasonally appropriate thing I wanted to bring up is that you're also an avid floral arranger. How did you get into that?
Well, I was at a wedding and I was sitting next to one of my old high school friends, and we were talking, and I was like, wow, I love these flowers. They're so pretty. I would love to do something like that. And she said, oh, I actually saw an internship list posted on Facebook. You should check it out. And so she told me about Jenny's projects. And so I applied and I interviewed and I got the internship. It was down to me and one other person. So I was very like, oh my gosh, yay. Honestly, I wasn't really sure if I was going to get it because I feel like I don't necessarily fit, like, the look of your stereotypical florist. But anyway, we ended up really getting along, and, like, I really enjoyed working with them. Like, it was fun. Yeah, I think just really being around beauty every day was really nice, and getting to be creative and just work with my hands. I really like doing things with my hands. And it's something I hadn't really considered until that day that we were at the wedding. And my friend was like, oh, hey, this could be possible. It kind of was like, oh, really? Wow, I didn't realize I would get what I wanted based on a comment,
If you were to arrange a bouquet to represent Galentine's Day, what would it look like?
Well, hands down, it would have tulips in it. And I like really colorful bouquets, kind of like maybe heavy on the pink, but with, like, pops of other color. There's some really pretty roses. There's this one they're just Juliet roses. They're garden roses, and they're like a peachy color, and they're so pretty. And then there's also just a lot of like little bitty flowers that look cute in addition to like the big ones. Like there's ones, they look like little daisies and they are really cute and have lots of greenery. Like I love eucalyptus and fern and just like long greenery.
That sounds adorable.
Yeah. Now I gotta go to the store.
That brings us to our ending current favorite segment. What is your current favorite thing right now?
I would say Doctor Who. We have been watching it. I think we're on the 4th season right now, and I love it. I really hate sometimes we're watching it and we have time for one more episode, but the next one's a 2-parter. So we have to watch something else. And I'm like, no, I just want to stay up later and watch Doctor Who.
I get that. I've actually never seen Doctor Who. My current TV obsession is Fargo. We're watching the most recent season, and it's super good. But with the world of streaming, you have to have the correct streaming service for everything, and it feels difficult to recommend shows to people.
Yeah, well, my husband has the DVDs, so we've been watching that, but it's on Max. But my husband's of the mindset that, like, if you really like something, then you should buy it on DVD. And so we have a lot of series on DVDs, which I
like that. Yeah, then you actually have it and you've supported the creators. I think that's a great idea. My current favorite thing is my workplace is doing an untalented show, and my coworker had brought this up to me as a joke. It was something she did in grad school, and essentially you were just taking something that either you used to be good at, you did piano lessons, or you did this routine for a show in high school or something like that, and you have not thought about it for decades, maybe. And I love this energy. I love that I'm part of a team of people who are into this idea. And so I'm helping to put one on maybe in February at some point. So maybe I'll share some updates. I'm going to play my ukulele. I was going to play my guitar, but as it turns out, I sold it. So don't have it anymore, but I still have a ukulele because they're really easy to keep around.
Yeah, that makes sense. They're a lot smaller.
Yes.
That sounds really fun.
That was such a fun discussion. I thought the setting was super fun and interesting, and it also delves into deeper topics like sexism in food media. We both really enjoyed the novel, and it provided lots of food for thought. I also learned that Karen just got her florist position by taking a chance and reaching out. Sometimes you just gotta try. What's in your current reading rotation? I could always use some recommendations. Reach out on social media or email nerdlandia.podcast@gmail.com. Up next, dispatches from Deutschland. I check in with my friend Molly, who moved to Germany last summer with her husband and their cat. We talk about the process of adjusting to a new language and culture with a whole different pace of living. That conversation will be out on February 21st. Catch you next time. Nerdlandia is hosted, produced, and edited by Emily Case Buskirk. Theme song and ending credit music by Keith West. Additional music by Sasha Enda.